I think when you look at a song like Illicit Affairs, for example,
That song wrecks
um,
me. Oh my gosh.
it's kind of intense, and it's the story is about, someone who's having this affair and trying to hide it. And when you look at it from a choices perspective and from a faith perspective, what's happening? The person is living two lives.
Mm,
The person is acting one way, and then they're making choices that don't align with who they are supposed to be,
yeah.
and the
Hmm.
repercussions of that you're seeing. Okay, how does this speak to a sister? Illicit affairs, that's kind of odd to be
Yeah.
talking about
Uh-huh.
that. When we sin, when we stray from the life that we're supposed to be living, that's where you start to see, okay, it might seem all right at first, or maybe there's not the big consequences,
Hmm.
but you end up having to lie, or you
Yeah.
end up making these choices where it seems like it's fun at first, or it's a pleasurable experience, for example,
Hmm.
but it doesn't end up that way, or the truth comes out in the end, whatever
Hmm.
metaphor that you might use with it. I think for us as people of faith, well, that's a really interesting thing to think about in regard to our spiritual life and to our behaviors every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, can we throw the lyrics up there? So illicit affairs. Tell yourself you can always stop. What started in beautiful rooms ends with meetings in parking lots. And it makes me think of Eve in the garden. Like, oh,
Mhm.
this fruit is good for eating, and then it ends with like death and pain and exile. And like it show in that there's a line in the chorus. They show their truth one single time, but they lie and they lie and they lie a million little times. And how often is that sin, is that temptation? It's like, here's something good, but they lie a million times. On the surface, it's about, an illicit romantic affair. And there's a lot of love triangle stuff going on this album, but I think
Sure.
you're right. It applies to there's this fake person that I'm being, then I'm lying to people about it. And then there's this true self. And that doesn't just apply to sex. Like there are people who have illicit affairs when it comes to how much they work. There's
Mhm.
people who have illicit affairs when it comes to, if you think of Thomas Aquinas and the four substitutes for God, like, wealth, power, pleasure, honor. Like there's people who have
Honor.
illicit affairs with fame and like wanting people to like them. There's people who have illicit affairs with control and power and trying to control everything that happens around them. Like this, you could apply this to somebody struggling with pornography. You could apply this with someone struggling with any slavery to a sin, any slavery to addiction. It shows its truth one single time, but it lies and it lies and it dies and it dies a million little times. Taylor does such a good job of showing the pain that comes from lust. And there was a
Mhm.
song on the last album called "Cruel Summer," which is one of my favorite songs on that album, and it's very thematically similar to this. And one of the lines in that song, it says, "I love you. Isn't that the worst thing you've ever heard?" And then it says, "He looks up grinning like a devil." And it's like this idea that I've given myself to this thing, and I love this thing, and it's not real. It's got total hold of me. And I think it's such a good cautionary tale. I've used "Cruel Summer" in class with students to talk about lust and bad relationships. And I think this song would work just as well. And I listen to this and it wrecks me because, I think we all have our own illicit affairs, and there's things that makes me think of that, like, yes, I know what that feels like. And I know people that have lived this story, and it's so true. It's so true. And it's so powerful. So,
Yeah, and not to get too much into like devil talk, but
mm-hmm,
that's a strategy of the evil one. If you can't get a person with something that's directly sinful and evil,
mm-hmm,
then you present something that seems to be good, or that might actually be good, like
mm-hmm,
work and overwork. Fame, which opens some doors that I can evangelize, for example, or
mm,
something like that, but then it becomes a god in the
yeah,
end,
yeah.
and it sort of takes the place of what's supposed to be an eternal and lasting relationship. And
Mm.
that's where, when you think of some of the others, like Invisible String,
Oh,
that's what
yeah.
happens when we, for example, if we give ourselves to someone else before we're married, like
Mm-hmm.
there's an invisible string there.
Yeah.
And that's, something we heal from, but also we have to think about what's going on in our interior life, because there's invisible strings to a whole lot of stuff. What am I filling my spirit with? What is capturing my attention and pulling me? Is that God? Because yeah, that would be great. Like God is that invisible string, and I don't want to release that relationship. But maybe there are some other things that are pulling at me as well. And I really liked that concept. You know, when I look at this album and say, like, well, how come Taylor just never gets to like the eternal love? Like, get
Mm-hmm.
past all this earthly love. Would you
Yeah.
just get to what's lasting and eternal? But I think what's there is those concepts, those themes, those words like, this is me trying. With me and God, I screw it up. And if there's an issue in the relationship, it's me. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
God's perfect. So if there's something wrong with my faith, it's probably me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I keep
Mm-hmm.
coming back and knocking on the door, and I say, look, this is me trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a few places where she kind of starts to hint that there's something beyond that. And I want to get back to that. We were talking about the